Hi guys. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Iman Ibrahim, one of Singapore's top divorce attorneys. It was an absolute pleasure. I'll let her introduce herself a little bit better, but we learned a little bit more about her job, what she gets involved with. For those of you that are thinking about getting divorced, what the process involves. Cheers. Iman, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Paul.
Can you introduce yourself to my audience and,
Yes,
what's your background?
Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Iman, and I am a family lawyer. I've known Paul since my 20s, so really that was like 2-3 years ago.
Make sure you get that in.
Jokes. We've known each other for a long time, and I'm really thrilled that Paul's invited me to be on his podcast. He's had very, important and high status individuals, and here I am, the person who works in the shadows, doing the work that's behind, but really work that's important. I think family law it covers a lot of topics, but for me, primarily, it covers, people transitioning to a new life, which is divorce. And it's not, the nicest topic to talk about, but it is a reality. And a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about divorce. It is a life-changing and can be a very traumatic event. Sometimes it's come about because of a lot of other traumas. But it doesn't have to be as bad as people make it out. It's how you want to play it. And so that's something that I think we can talk about because, there are lots of things that people think about divorce, or people who come to me and some of their questions are, they've read it, they've heard it from friends, but they don't really know what it is all about, what they can get out of it, and how really to move forward from a life that you've had as a coupled, entwined, and maybe with children as well, to your own life and a new routine and a new everything. The divorce part is just the legal unentanglement, but there is so much more to it. And sometimes my role is more than just being a lawyer. There's therapist, there's friend, there's coach, and I do what I can because I'm not interested in just getting you out of your entanglement. That's one part of it. But I actually care about my clients and want them to make sure that they're moving on to a life that's sustainable and can be happy as they move forwards.
Well, the misconception of anyone that gets paid to do anything, right, is are you a parasite? And, how do you... And the thing is, I know you well enough and you shared with me that you care about your clients, right? And you're helping them through that terrible journey. I don't know if I told you this. So my aunt, my mum's sister, she was a family lawyer her entire career. And the stories she used to tell us, and, so she worked in the East End of London. So there were a lot of trauma. And I remember sitting around the dinner table, and she's such a great storyteller. And you kind of would go with her on that journey. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to have a chat today. And on top of that, I have to say, unfortunately, 40 to 50% of my friends have either got divorced or thinking of going through divorce.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got loads of things I want to talk to you about. But if we can, just unpack, because you, Tara, my wife, the whole group of you, most of you did law. So what was your journey? Because obviously your dad's a lawyer, but can you just share, how did that come about growing up in Singapore?
Well, I mean, it's a bit less noble than it is for a lot of people. I think it was one of those things where I wasn't very sure what I wanted to do with my life. But yes, as you say, my father was a lawyer. And so it sort of became, and my friends were interested in doing law. And so I just followed them like a sheep.
But when was it when you decided this is what you were going to do at uni?
So I hadn't decided it probably until closer to the end of completing junior college and A-levels.
What did you do for A-levels?
So when I was doing my A-levels, I actually picked topics that would allow me to go into medicine or go to vet school. So I did chemistry and biology. They were the science-based topics.
Okay.
And but after going through 2 years of studying biology, I realized that I would never remember all the names of everything, which you have to do. And then as a doctor, it becomes even more things that you have to remember. So then I realized, you know what, I don't think I can do that, but I could do law, as in I've always been good at writing, speaking, and generally getting my ideas across. And since my friends were going to do it, it seemed like a nice thing for us to all sort of do together. Honestly, it's very simplistic. I didn't have any grand schemes of this is what I was going to go into, and then, these are my progressions. And
but it was a launch pin, right?
Yeah.
You go to a great uni. You went to King's.
I went to King's.
How did you choose and decide on King's?
Well, I knew that I wanted to be based in London because I am a city girl. I love city life, and I didn't really see myself being far away from London. I knew it well because I have family there, and then a few of my friends were going there. And for Singaporeans who want to come back to Singapore to work as lawyers, you are limited to the number of universities you can choose to go to.
Oh, really?
They have a list of approved universities, so you can only go to one of those.
How long's the list now, and is it longer than it used to be? Do you remember roughly?
I think it's probably around the same because I don't think their criteria changes much.
Okay.
At the time, I think they weren't that keen on Australian universities, but now they're okay with it, so that's expanded that way.
Roughly,
But I think,
do you remember how many UK unis?
Maybe 25.
Okay, so
around
it's quite
20 to
specific.
25. Yeah,
Oh,
so you don't have a lot of choice.
Okay.
But of course, I mean, there's not that many universities in Singapore itself, so it is good to be able to go overseas. And it was exciting to go away because I'd always lived a very sheltered and comfortable life with my family, and the idea of going away was, of course, super exciting because I've never had that kind of independence. So that's what happened, really. And when you go to law school, you sort of get told, well, these are the motions you need to go through. You finish, you then decide which course you're going on, whether for the UK, whether you want to be a barrister or a solicitor, and then you just go off and do all the courses, get the training done, and then you're qualified. And so I went through all of that. And I suppose along that road, it was more of after I finished school and had gone into training and practice that I sort of found myself doing more and more family work. And for example, in the UK, my supervising solicitor was a very well-known family lawyer, a very well-respected guy. So he definitely taught me a lot, and I got to experience a lot. So I did also do family work.
But going through uni, right? Because when you come out, you have to then choose what type of law potentially you want to do.
Sometimes you can't choose it because the places for training are very, very contested. It's very limited. It's so limited to the point that some people have to defer training for a few years because they can't get a spot in the current year. So I was quite lucky, but it was because I went to a smaller law firm, not one of the name brands.
Yeah.
But for me, I think that was a great experience because you get a lot of face time with the most senior person.
I agree.
You're not just a small cog in the giant machine. You have to do a lot of things.
Because that's equivalent in a big firm. There's probably 4 or 5 layers.
There's several layers. So you may not always get that time with the most senior person. Yeah. And you may find yourself doing the same repetitious thing with maybe less variety because you do get a little bit shoehorned into what you're going to be doing in each department of a large law firm. Whereas when you're in a smaller practice, I mean, they do a lot of other things as well. And so you get to have a go at those more general things, a bit like a GP with a specialization in something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you realize that I'm going down this path? Because if you look at all your other friends, you all went down slightly different paths.
We did.
Within legal. Like, was it a natural calling? Was it kind of just by chance?
I think I found it interesting. The human factor for family law is, it's there. And people act so differently when it's their personal lives compared to, of course, a general commercial transaction.
Yeah.
And you realize how much impact you can have. And I know that sounds trite or, cheesy or corny, but it really does make a difference because it is someone who's going through a really tough time most of the time. And you can see the depth and range of their emotions. Sometimes you meet their children as well. You can see the impact of what's going on there. It's really huge.
Yeah.
And it is really, the thing about law, it's a game. It's how well you argue the law and whether you can convince a judge that you're right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even just the law, it's the nuances. And sometimes you may be more persuasive than someone else. And that's how you get a result for your client in a fought court case. So
how much of what you guys go through is you have backdoor conversations with the other legal team?
We wouldn't call it backdoor. For us, we call it without prejudice, because sometimes you can have a better conversation over a phone call. You know, as you know, sometimes you can't get across what you want to say in a letter because that's committing too much.
Yeah.
But you'll have a off the record conversation to get a feel of what the other, if your opponent is someone that you can talk to, that maybe you can have a relationship with, because it's not all the same. Not all lawyers are the same. And maybe some are not so motivated to find a solution that works for everyone, because sometimes that solution comes at the price of having less billings.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, I mean, all we do is sell our time.
Yeah.
And the more time we can sell, the more billings we make.
Yes.
And the longer you fight for something, the longer you drag it out, of course, the more money you can make. If you find a good and fast solution for someone, well, that's the end.
Is it so you can't, so if I was a client, right, and hopefully I'll never be a client, but if I said to you, I'm not going to pay you per hour, I want to pay you based on the job.
Yep.
Can't do that.
There are law firms that do that.
Like a fixed fee.
A fixed fee. I mean, I would say there's a law firm for everyone and for every budget.
Yeah.
But the maybe the attention that you get is definitely going to be different.
What about retainers? You guys...
So we always take a deposit.
Yeah.
For our law firm anyway, we always take a deposit, and then we try and bill as we go along, so that you don't get a large, rude surprise at the end. But a more manageable sort of monthly ongoing thing for as long as you go on for.
Because when I'm trying to sell a retainer, quite often the answer is no, we don't do retainers.
Yeah.
And I'll have done my research. And for example, if one of the CEOs has been through a bitter divorce, I'll just say, listen, if you have a heart attack, you need to engage a cardiologist. You're having an operation, you're going to have to pay for that. Yeah. Right? And, when you're getting divorced, you need to retain a top attorney to help you. And they get it. They realize it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's true. The reason why we have a retainer is because normally we have to pay out for you first.
Ahead of time.
So that's just to cover to make sure that we can get that back. Or because we do the work first before we bill you. And I mean, that's worth something. So
what I want to understand, right, is if somebody comes to you, let's just pretend a lady comes to you and says, look, I think my husband's cheating on me. I've hired a PI to check whether or not he's cheating on me with my sister.
Oh, God.
I mean, what? I mean, you've probably had conversations like that. At that point, what do you say?
Honestly, my first thing is to say, don't hire a PI. It's so expensive. Sometimes their fees are more than lawyers.
Really?
Because they have to do many, many hours of surveillance, and you do pay them by the hour.
Do you remember there was a guy in the newspaper, and it was I don't know if it was taking the piss, but there was a picture of him, a local guy, PI, and he was sat in a park with a hole cut out with the newspaper, and he was deadly serious, but it was like,
oh my gosh.
But PIs are still a thing here in Singapore.
PIs are still a thing, and I think if there's something burning that you need to know, and you really want the answer to it, then by all means make that investment.
Really?
But I think that if you suspect your spouse is cheating, or if you're thinking of a divorce, you probably already want a divorce. Yeah. And you may not need to make that investment because the money would be better deployed to getting a better legal solution for you.
Yes.
So that's that's always my immediate thought. It's like, do you really need a PI?
Okay, so if the prospective client comes to you and says, I'm thinking of getting a divorce, I haven't decided.
I get a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well,
but will you give them, why I say that's a strange question. It's like, if you ask a waiter or waitress, is this any good? They're really going to say, no, it tastes like shit. You don't buy that. Go for this one. Yeah. Right? So if someone comes to you as a divorce attorney, are you literally going to say, I don't think you should get a divorce? Do you know what I mean?
Actually, I have said that before.
I'm sure you have, but
that I think is just me. Well, normally we run through a few things, and I'll ask some questions, and they'll basically tell me what's going on or what's their thought process. And then I think what really helps people really, get to the answer or a decision as to what they want to do is, and I don't think a lot of people ask this, but I think this is part of a life coaching type of question, is where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Yeah. And that's it's in a way, it's an annoying question, but sometimes you do have to think about that, because the reason why you're coming to see me is because you have uncomfortable feelings. And the question is, can you sit with those? Can you work past those? Or will you still be having them, maybe worse, in 5 years' time? A lot of people want to protect their peace.
Yeah.
That's become a big thing since we've all had COVID and circuit breaker and having to stay at home more.
Yeah.
And I think that people realize that putting up with a situation that is, and I'm not saying that life always must be perfect and ideal, but that is really negative for you.
Yeah.
And realizing that in 5 years' time, I don't want to be in that situation anymore and I want something different. And so how do I get there? Is it by making that life change, which is having a divorce and knowing all the impact that it has for you, but not just for you, the people around you, and in particular, if you have children, your children, is that going to be something that's worthwhile to do for yourself to make sure that you can have some peace in 5 years' time? And I think that after people sit with this question, and it may not be immediately when they're sitting there with me, but after they take that question home with them and really think about it, they will usually come to a yes, because
they've already
life
been thinking.
5 years where you've had that, where you've got the peace, is so glorious that you want it sooner.
But you're right though, because the thing is, sometimes I'll reverse it. Sometimes a lot, the adage that you don't know what you've got until it's gone.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So I think it's really important when people do fast forward scenarios to try to imagine their life.
Yep.
I mean, if I look at my marriage, right, I think I've got an amazing marriage. So
You do.
Yeah. So a lot of people will say it's hard work. I mean, it's probably hard work for Tara because she's married to me. But I sometimes...
No comment.
Well, yes, you can't say anything that she said to you on the record. But I look at our journey and I wonder at what point does a couple get to that breaking point? But the reality is, who knows, right? So if I said to you, what's the most common reason why someone wants to get a divorce? And it's never one thing, and it's complex. But what would be the answer?
I think it's because they grew apart.
So it's not infidelity.
Infidelity is the symptom, but it's not the problem or the illness.
You're good.
Yeah.
You're good. Let me retain you. But not for me, for someone else.
I mean, the truth is that's not always the case. I mean, some people are just serially unable to keep it in their trousers, pants, or skirt, whatever you want. Yeah. But I think that most of the time, if you even feel tempted, it's because there's something else going on. And I think for Singapore anyway, I think it's because a lot of the times people get married before they're ready because of Asian societal pressures or norms or stereotypes that you feel you have to conform to.
Well, it's also getting an HDB flat. Think about it. The process here is it's reversed.
This is one of my big bugbears.
Yeah. And well, the other thing is, like in the West, people tend to live together.
Yeah. So here it's really frowned upon to live together.
Yeah.
So you never really get to know the other person that intimately in order to really make an informed decision. I mean, marriage is such a huge decision and choice.
It's the biggest.
And sometimes you don't know enough to really make that decision. But because society says, oh, we've been dating for 2 or 3 years now, it's time for us to start thinking about getting married or getting serious, or your family pressure, whatever it is, housing pressures, even financial pressures to get together in a marriage. And then is it any surprise it doesn't work out really?
Yeah.
So
that's a really good point.
But I mean, on other times, sometimes you have got to know the person really well. But the fact is, we change so much in life, between your 20s, your 30s to your 40s. Think about how much you've grown and changed as a person. And you're really lucky if your partner is growing in the same way and you're not both growing apart or becoming very different people.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe the whole concept of marriage is a tricky one. I mean, there are other people who are not married, but who are together.
Yeah, very happy.
And very happy without necessarily having that legal tag on them. So
what do you think inspired you? I mean, because you are a family lawyer. When I think of you as a divorce attorney.
Yes.
Right? So what inspired you really to specialize in this? Because it's why I ask, it's got to be emotionally very draining.
I mean, after a while, you disassociate.
I'm sure. You have to, right?
No. I mean, you have to do what you have to do to protect yourself so that you can be efficient and effective.
Yeah.
But of course, yes, you feel the feelings of your clients. If you're a decent person, you would feel the feelings of your clients, and they're very strong feelings, and sometimes they don't mean to, but they do take it out on you or junior members of your team.
I'm sure
not necessarily on me.
But you see the worst of people.
I would see the worst of people.
What's been the most unusual case you've ever worked on? I'm curious.
Well, what's unusual to you?
Cross-dressing tendencies? I don't know.
I mean, yeah, people do that, but is it really unusual? I think it's not. I think the problem again would then, for cross-dressing tendencies...
See, Isaac, you're not the only one.
would go back to the fact that you didn't disclose it in the first place. I mean, maybe your partner is okay with it as long as you do it in a particular way, like they don't have to see it, or that's your 1 hour or whatever of time.
Yeah.
If you talked about it and been just upfront.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, this is assuming you knew you were a cross-dresser in the beginning.
Maybe you learned later on.
If you learned later on, then, I mean, I don't know, maybe you still have to talk about it. But
there's got to be one unusual case or a few that you look back and say, wow, that was a bit tough.
I mean, sadly, the ones that stick out are always the ones which made me feel traumatized. And those tend to relate to there being issues with children. I mean, unfortunately, the good ones you never really remember because they're great, and so you don't need to think about them anymore. But
valid point.
But the ones where I can see that children are being harmed, and I mean emotionally, not necessarily physically.
Yeah.
I often wonder what was my role in that?
Yes.
Could I have done better to make it better for them? Because they're just a victim. Really, they're the victim.
Of course.
It's going to impact them not just in this moment, but how they have relationships in future. And they would have seen how this... I mean, the adults are responsible, but sometimes their big feelings get in the way of them being reasonable, logical, sensible, or seeing the bigger picture, because they're fixated at this one moment in time. But as adults, fine, you can do whatever you want to the other adult. It's what you do.
Yeah.
But the child doesn't have necessarily all the facilities to deal with what's happening. And, the impact is far more. And the court realizes this, by the way, as well. So the court itself is moving away from adversarial and, fighting about things and encouraging what they call therapeutic justice, which is putting the family first. At the moment, I find it quite child-focused, which I think is great, but
Fantastic.
I really look forward to it expanding because there are a lot of people who have chosen not to have children or just don't have children.
Yeah.
And it's not that divorce is any less traumatic for them. And they are a family. It's not that they're not a family.
Yeah.
So I do think that there are also those people who still need as much tender loving care from the court as those families with children. But I am very glad that we're moving in that direction. And putting the family first. How
long does the divorce tend to take? From start to finish?
Well, okay. In Singapore, we have two types of divorces. One where everything has been agreed and one where nothing is agreed or a few things are agreed. So for the one where you've been able to agree everything before filing the papers, it's a fast-track simplified divorce, and that can happen within about 6 months. And then for the normal track, which is where maybe you have agreed some things but not everything, it would usually go on for 1.5 years, up to 2.5 years.
Okay.
And then anything beyond 3 years is a long one.
Jeez.
With a lot of fighting. And if you think about it, the decision to divorce is the easiest part then.
Yeah.
It's going through 1.5 years or 3 years, up to 3 years of, seeing me, talking to me, having to make decisions on top of your daily working life. And I appreciate that it's very hard for clients. You have your day job and then you probably have children to look after or a household to look after or whatever, pets to look after when you come home. And then you have your lawyer asking you a lot of hard questions, asking you to basically give an analysis of your life with all the math and accounting, really having a long, hard look so that we can cut it up and divide it and, try and make sure that everyone has a fair piece of the pie to then go on to their next stage. But all this whilst you're living your daily life. I mean, it's really, really hard.
I think I've told you this when we last met. I don't know why, but I've been asked to intervene with maybe it's 4 couples that were thinking of getting divorced, and it's like, I don't want to get involved because it's,
it's emotionally draining.
It's really tough. Are there women's shelters for battered women in Singapore that you know of?
The answer is kind of yes, there are, but I'm not sure people want to go there. I think it's there are. I've met when I do pro bono work, I think I tend to interact more, and it's where you have a social worker, and it's for women who really have no financial resources. And it's always it's not the nicest.
But the reason why I ask is I was thinking about this in preparation for today, and so the primary middle school I went to, it was a neighborhood school, great school, loved it. There was a women's refuge.
Okay.
And
the school?
No, close to the school. Right, sorry, and quite a few of the kids would go to my school.
Right.
But they would rotate because it was a temporary home, so they might be there for 1, 2, 3 terms a year max. And there was a local after school club, and it was only for effectively kids that were from less fortunate families and from this type of setup. Because my mum worked for the council, my brother and I were the only kids it was called the Weldon Centre. We were there for years. And so we saw these poor kids, and a lot of the mums were beaten, the dads were in prison, and I sometimes wonder if that's how I got to understand and connect with people. And later on, I remember I told you I used to teach women that were rape victims self-defense. And it's, when you see someone that's been through a lot of trauma as an adult, but when they were a child, to me, you can feel it. It's deeply profound.
You can actually feel it.
Yeah. So what you're doing, I think you're spot on. What are there any divorce myths that you would want to debunk?
It's the one that is the biggest is always, how much more do I get because he's cheated on me or she's cheated on me, so she shouldn't have XYZ amount of money. And then I always have to go, well, that's not how it works.
It's not.
The money, the division of assets, the money part, it's based on your contributions to the marriage.
Financially, you mean?
Financially and non-financially, because obviously there are some who are stay-at-home
So if you're gonna
spouses.
If you're gonna fuck around is all.
Well, I mean, yes, okay. Try not to bring the STDs back. So unfortunately, that's one of the most common things is that people think that that the person who was the naughty one should be punished financially, and that they should be financially, I don't want to say enriched, and nor do I want to say rewarded, but maybe compensated for their hurt. But the point is, in any divorce, everyone gets hurt. And then are you then looking at compensating? I mean, how do you even do it? So it's not a concept in law to punish or compensate for hurt in the divorce, but rather it's simply based on your contributions. Because in a marriage, you should be contributing 50-50.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that 50-50 financially. I just mean that you do your part in whatever it is that needs to be done. So really, if it's a long marriage, it's fair that you each walk away 50-50.
Yeah.
But of course, there are nuances, and the court sort of categorizes short marriages, medium marriages, long marriages, and then they have single income and dual income marriages.
A lot of couples, I think, when I've spoken to some of my male friends, they've stayed in the marriage because they don't want to see the financial downside, right?
Yes, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, I do. But one of the interesting things, when I talk, I've had a few friends that have cheated on their spouses, and they've come to me and they've spoken, and it's interesting because they desperately want to get out of the marriage. But I said, well, what about the kids?
Yeah.
Have you thought about that? Do that fast forward scenario, do that deep dive. But I think it's like anything, when it's volatile and you're emotional,
you can't always make a rational thought.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So being a divorce attorney, how has it changed and shaped your view of marriage and relationships?
I mean, to be fair, I know that I only see the bad side of things.
Yeah.
And when I need to see the good side, I have to look at you. So...
But we've got some friends that are very happily married, right?
We do. I'm glad for that, because it does show that it does work. If not, I would definitely think that it always doesn't work. But I do kind of also think that, number one, marriage is not for everyone. And that I still don't necessarily think that marriage should be forever, or that you need to be together with someone forever. I mean, part of that is because for myself, I didn't get married.
Yeah.
And although I didn't get married, I do have a child, and I am really quite happy living a single person life.
Yeah.
So I personally don't see the need to get married.
But the funny thing is, in Singapore, that's fairly uncommon.
It's very uncommon.
But in the UK,
it's normal.
The high school I went to, by the time I finished high school, 16, 2 of the girls had already had kids in my form class of 30. So that's 15 girls, and one was halfway along.
Oh no!
And so people, they really, none of them were mine, by the way.
Okay, great. Good to know. I mean, I think that's a little different, because that's not necessarily making an adult decision.
No.
I think mine was more of an adult decision in that, I chose not to be married.
Yeah.
And there was no pressure on. I mean, there was the tiniest amount of pressure, but honestly, not that much pressure. And my parents and family and friends were all very supportive. Yeah. And I guess I believed in myself enough to know that I would be fine.
Yeah.
And
well, you're very strong like that. But we talked about this when we had a drink last. And it was almost, sometimes when we look back, it might have been delusion. It naivety.
It was the delusion of being in your 20s and thinking you can really do it all, and not really thinking too far down the future. Just thinking, I can do this. I'll be fine. But
it's so I've got an amazing wife, and we still struggle. And we work very well as a partnership. So being a single parent must be so tough.
I mean, parenting is tough, but when you say you still struggle, does that mean the working on your relationship part as well?
No, not that part.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I think.
As in, I do think that people who remain married for a long time have to make an effort. It's not, I mean, the problem is that you're sold the concept of marriage, of it being sunshine and rainbows and confetti and sprinkles and sparkles without it having to have any real effort. Like, nobody teaches you how to be married. And maybe that's also one of the reasons why there are people who are divorced, because I don't even think Asian parents really teach their kids how to adult well, how to manage your emotions well. I'm not saying everyone, I'm just saying I think I don't even teach it that well.
Yeah.
And so then you become a certain type of adult, and nobody really also teaches you how to be married.
Yeah.
And what are the give and take parts. I do appreciate that some religious requirements for marriage require you to go on a pre-marriage course.
Yeah.
So I know that so my Catholic friends have been on a pre-marriage course, which I think has helped them a lot, where you talk about the things that you don't normally talk about, the ugly things like, how are we going to do the finances? How are we going to do the savings? But also realistic day-to-day things like, how often do you want to have sex in a week?
Yeah.
And how many children you want to have? Like, sometimes
can you put that into the contract? Could you
I
write
think it's a contract, but I think that people don't always have those conversations.
I can imagine a priest, though, if you're Catholic, and my wife's Catholic, going to Father Ted and saying, "Listen, Father Ted, if you're an Irishman, will she
run by counselors, not Father Ted?"
I know, but I'm just saying, so will she give it to me at least 3 times a week? If not, I'm not signing.
No, but to be fair, I think that people have also walked away from these pre-marriage courses and decided that that's not the right thing for them.
An approach, right?
And that's as they don't want to get married anymore to this person, or they don't want to get married because they've realized all of these things are not going to happen with this person.
Yeah.
So I think that that's good, but it's not for it doesn't happen for everyone. It's not a compulsory thing.
Yes.
And so
I think making the effort, like I'll write to Tara, I'll send her a WhatsApp, say, "Dear Mrs. Quinn, you're cordially invited to dinner, romantic dinner with your very sexy, handsome husband. Please RSVP." And then
you're giving away all your secrets now.
I know, but listen, I'm trying to help my brothers out, right? And then she won't reply for 2 or 3 hours, and I'll say, "If you don't RSVP, someone else's wife might." Just a bit of banter, right? Yeah. So what is the weirdest thing that you've ever been asked to fight for on behalf of a client?
Nothing's really weird to me anymore.
Yeah, but there must be some freaky things out there.
Okay, there's really nothing freaky. I think it's just that some people are very OTT, and I find myself having to negotiate hours of a day.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say Chinese New Year, which is a 2-dayer in Singapore. And some couples are very specific. They need to also have the reunion dinner the night before. And they can't, or they insist on splitting the day in half if it's a special day to them, so that the child or children spend half the day with one parent and half with the other.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, who is this being fair to? Are you really being fair to your child? Because for them, there's that stress of the first half of the day is with this parent. And then, you know, when you're with one parent, children act a certain way. And with the other parent, they have to act a different way, you know, even with their parents' families.
For sure.
Like maybe they like granny, grandma, and cousins and aunties and whatever on the side more, or they're just more comfortable and relaxed there. And they have a great time there. Then they have to have the struggle and rush to get to the next place. And then readjust their mindsets or the way that they behave, and have to be a different way with the different parent, different family situations. Does that make it a nice Chinese New Year for them?
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so, though.
You know, one of the things I was thinking, a few things that probably make you great at your job. One is, and I want to come back to this in a minute, about, you know, having become a coach. But I also think it's your life experiences, having lived and worked abroad, you know, raising your son, so, yeah, and the fact that you love life so much, like you've done so many different things.
Yeah.
Like, the one thing that you and I have in common is we have lots of passions.
Yeah.
We follow them, we try them, we do them for a couple of years, and we want to try the next thing.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious, you becoming a coach, has it helped you? Because ultimately you're a therapist to a lot of your clients.
So yeah, an untrained therapist.
Yeah.
But not really a therapist. I mean, a lot of times, I think the reason why I decided to learn more about coaching is because I realized that it's a very important part of the lawyering that I do.
Tell us about that, Jen, because I'm fascinated, because that's very interesting.
Well, I mean, as we've said, I deal with people who are in a different emotions and strong emotions, and sometimes I don't know how to deal with it. And then I wonder if I could have dealt with it better. Or even just working with my team, sometimes I wonder, what's the best, how do I get better out of them? How can I make them see a certain thing or change a certain way that they approach things? And then one of my friends got into coaching, not you.
Who was it?
A female friend of mine. She decided to pursue coaching because she found it interesting for her personal journey and growth. And at the time, I didn't think too much of it. But later on, I had some dilemmas that I needed some help when I was talking to her about it. And then I realized that she had very subtly coached me into coming to my own conclusion.
Really?
And that's when I realized, actually, I think I want to know a bit more about coaching, you know, formally, because I think that is actually a very useful skill for me to have with clients. Clients sometimes don't know what they want.
Yeah.
And you can ask them a dozen times in different ways, and they still can't tell you because they don't know what they want. So they can't tell you, and they can't give you clear instructions. And I need clear instructions in order to be effective. So I thought that I would learn a bit more about coaching. So I went on a coaching course, and it's been very eye-opening. It teaches you how to deal with people in a way, without necessarily being a therapist, but how you can talk to them or communicate with them for them to get to the conclusion or a conclusion, without you telling them what to do.
Is conflict resolution one of the topics that they actually touch upon, or you have that?
They talk about it briefly, but I've done conflict resolution courses differently. Yeah, in a different place.
It is interesting.
It is interesting. I mean, I first actually started out with doing conflict resolution courses, but those were more legal based.
Yeah.
And so the idea was just how to be more effective as a lawyer doing conflict resolution without necessarily teaching you the length and the breadth of the soft skills that you need to have to really resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is, as a lawyer, you only act on one side. You don't act on the other side.
That's
you can't be responsible for how they're going to react.
But do you have where you have the couple in the room at the same time screaming at each other? That must happen every now and again, right?
Not very often.
Oh, really?
After COVID, so before COVID, at the court, if there is a child, there's compulsory mediation and counselling. So that would be the one time where everyone gets together in the court building, and you have your client, the other side, and their client, and everyone's together in the same room, and that's really hard.
It is.
Nobody teaches you that that's going to be so hard, because the lawyers always, I mean, we know we're there to resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
We also know, or some of us know, a lot of us know, that if we don't resolve it, we'll earn more. And
that's got to be, but because you're a good human being, I think you know that, and that I guess the challenge for you is you're rarely going to get repeat customers, right?
Well, I've never got a repeat.
But you get hopefully you get a referral. Right?
We get referrals, or people who want to come back for other bits of law things that they need done, for sure. A lot of clients come to me because of someone else who's had a good experience working with me.
Yeah.
But I mean, the reality is that conflict resolution is very hard, and we're not trained in it.
What's the one thing that you think couples do all the time that are going through divorce where they shouldn't do?
They're just not listening to each other. The communication has usually been impacted by the feelings, so they can't hear what the other person is saying, even if they're being this. Even if the same thing is being said, if the same thing was said to them by a friend, by anyone else, they would hear it
100%.
But because it's coming from the person that they dislike the most at the moment, then they just don't hear it.
What percentage of your clients are female? A larger percentage, I would imagine.
It's a larger percentage.
Do you think it's because you're a lady?
Yes. I think it's because men feel more comfortable with a male lawyer.
So interesting.
That they feel that there's a connection there then.
It's funny because I had a therapist for a short time, and I wanted to work with a male therapist that was a lot older, like probably in his 50s or 60s, that had experienced many different things. And after seeing him, it's not that I changed my mind about that, but I didn't really think about why.
Right.
But it's interesting. But
it's probably because you thought that you would respect him more, or
no, it wasn't that. It was I felt like maybe because I had some things to share about my childhood,
right?
And I felt probably a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah. I think that's fair, because a lot of times male clients feel that a female lawyer is only there to represent the female interests.
Yeah.
And they want someone who's like aggressive, and going to fight for them. Okay. But the point, I think, of all of this is, what are you fighting for, really?
Well, that's the thing, right? Do you think that prenup is really a romance killer, or do you think it's something that most couples should look at?
At the end of the day, you can't contract out of the law. So where the law says, the division of assets is based on your contributions, if you signed a prenup that was like, zero, someone gets zero, it would never hold up.
Okay.
In a long marriage or a longer marriage. So in any event, prenups are not, they're not considered strictly legally binding in Singapore.
Okay.
And that the court will consider it, but will still apply the facts of the law, which is based on contributions. But I think it's useful to discuss the points which are contained in a prenup.
Do you I don't know if you know this, so when I first started dating Tara, after about 2 weeks, we were outside, we were walking, holding hands, and I bumped into someone I knew, and I introduced her as my girlfriend. Yeah. And when we got back, she said, "What gave you the right to introduce me as your girlfriend?" I said, "Oh, really? What, do you want me to, formally ask you?" She said, "That would be nice. Do you want me to write you a contract and stuff?" She goes, "Yeah, why not?" So I went back that night, I'd had a few drinks, and my flatmate was a lawyer, Ian Wright, if you're listening. And we wrote this amazing contract.
I want to see it.
We can't repeat most of it because it's absolutely hilarious. But I think that's actually what won her, because it was quite interesting. Yep. So how does it work in Singapore? So obviously, watching US TV, I see divorce papers being served. Yeah. Is that the same thing here?
Yes.
What's the strangest way that you've had divorce papers being served?
I don't think we've had strange ways, but I think we have some really odd requests. So sometimes we're asked to serve on someone's birthday.
Oh, shit, really?
Or on the anniversary of their marriage or something significant like that. I'm like, okay, we can do that, but what's wrong with you?
I mean, that is savage. And what happens if you say, "Look, I don't think we should do that"? You just do it, right?
Oh, no, I don't say I don't think we should do that. I mean, I'm just like, okay, because you have to pick your battles.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I don't care about fighting over these small things. These are small things to me. I just think that's petty.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's fine. If that's what you want to do, we can do that. I can understand where the sentiment comes from, but it just shows me who you are.
I guess, you talked about this earlier, you've learned to become emotionally detached.
Yeah.
But, have there been times where you've gone back and, you really,
I think there are some things I can't forget. Like I attended a court session where the audio recording of a child being abused was being played.
Oh, God.
And that I attended very early on in my career. I have not forgotten what that sounds like. And
It haunts you.
You do wonder, like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Or like, what goes through a parent's mind for you to do that to your child?
Yeah.
But also knowing that that's a sign. Again, it's a symptom of something else, and I'm not taking it lightly.
Yeah.
I mean, the children in that case, I do know what happened to them. They have carried trauma,
Of course.
the whole way through and had difficulties throughout and are troubled young adults now.
Yeah.
So I can see firsthand what all of this does, even if the divorcing couple at the time don't see it.
Yeah.
Another one, again, that stuck with me is emotional abuse of a child. And I could see, and the thing is, it was my client who was doing it to their child. And I could see it. And then after a while, I decided that I couldn't be a facilitator of this.
Yeah.
I mean, that you have to, I personally have to draw the line. It's not all just about the money.
Yeah, good.
And I decided that I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I got out of that.
Walked away.
But at the same time, it feels like I abandoned the child because
I know.
I know that that child's not going to grow up normally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that stuck with me as well.
Really sad.
It's really, really sad, but the rest, not so much. I really think sometimes you just, those are the other ones you just detach yourself from. They're very day to day.
If you were to give one piece of advice to couples that are about to get divorced,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I actually think you should see a counselor or a therapist and work through all of your feelings, because they're big feelings and we can't, like, your lawyer's not there to deal with it. And honestly, do you want to? I think we cost more than therapists per hour.
Yeah.
And our offices are not as nice. So go and see the therapist. Genuinely go and see the therapist. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Or do what you have to do. I mean, if you need to exercise more, I mean, it's a lot of things of how you can work out your feelings. Definitely maybe talk therapy is not a thing for you.
Yeah.
But a therapist may be able to help you just identify how you're feeling so that you can then go off and deal with it. Some people need to travel a lot. Some people need to, try not to do the shop a lot. The retail therapy is not the best idea. You might be accused of dissipating assets. So don't do the retail therapy, but maybe go exercise or go travel or do something for yourself. Make sure you've got that thing that helps you through all of this, because as I say, you're going to have to do your day-to-day job. You're probably going to have to look after your children. You have to answer my questions. You need to have something for yourself.
I find it interesting because, again, going back to when people have spoken to me, and I've said to people, well, look, if your kids were going through a hard time, say they failed in school, they got into trouble with the police or whatever, you wouldn't abandon them. So why are you thinking of abandoning your wife or your husband after 20 years of marriage because you're going through a bad patch? Because we've all suffered at some point probably from depression.
Yep.
As we get older, it's a midlife crisis. We talked about that off camera. There are so many different changes that are happening, or you get laid off, you lose your job, you have a stroke. Like when my dad had a stroke and he couldn't work anymore, the whole family dynamic changed.
Yeah.
I was 14.
Yeah.
And he was on the wrong medication for about 2.5 years.
Yep.
And he was a mean SOB for 2.5, 3 years, really tough.
Yeah.
And my mum's 1 year death anniversary was a couple of days ago, and I called my brother.
Okay.
And we were reminiscing about our childhood, which we had a fantastic childhood.
Yeah.
But we grew up in an environment where there were raised voices, right? And so we try not to duplicate that, right, at home.
Yeah.
Right. And we were talking a little bit about that. But do you feel that if you spoke to someone like a friend, maybe not client, what you would like to say, look, you know what you're about to go through. It's a fucking shitstorm, right? Why don't you guys go back and at least try to recalibrate this? What do you think?
Okay, I mean, it depends on how the client is in that first meeting, because...
No, let's say it's a friend.
Okay, it's a friend.
So they're not at the point where they're saying, I want to get divorced, but they're complaining. And they're saying, look, this is going tits up. I'm thinking of getting out of the marriage. I don't care anymore.
I mean, so it's a very hard one. I think it depends on whether there's the possibility that whatever is the problem can be overcome or is going to decrease over time. I mean, if a friend was being emotionally abused, or, there's just so many red flags, I don't think I could say stick it out.
Yeah, that's different, right?
Yeah.
You've got to go.
But if it's a hump because, as you say, the other person's depressed or they're going through something, parents died, whatever, then I would say, is there something else you can try? Or if you thought of the happier times, how could you get back to it?
Yeah.
What would you do? What would you give? Because a lot of it is about some element of compromise or sacrifice.
Yes.
What would you give to get that back? What would you invest in your time doing? But I mean, it is hard because you still need the other person to be on board with it.
Yeah.
They need to be ready and open to making some changes, I'm sure, or receiving some help or support. And then after you've given that a go, then okay, if you really can't, fair enough, get a divorce.
And it's done. What are some of the more creative custody arrangements that you've seen?
Creative? The thing is creative good for the child? I've seen people who do 1 week on with one parent and 1 week with the other parent.
This has become more common.
It's becoming more of a thing because people want equal time with the child.
It's hard, man.
And then they say, well, it's fair for the child to have equal time with the parent. And again, I say, is it really what the child wants? And, sometimes the children are too young to be able to say what they want. Or they may be somewhat influenced by one parent over another, or they take the side of one parent over another. I'm not sure that 1 week on and 1 week off is good, but I know that a lot of people do it, or 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, whatever it is. But I can also see it from the perspective of the parent who doesn't get as much time. So, for example, most normal arrangements will be that the children are with the mother.
Yeah.
That's where they stay. And then they'll see the father on alternate weekends because, of course, even though mother has the children during the week, she's working. During the weekdays, she's not really spending time with them. So it's only fair when she's not working at the weekend, she gets a weekend as well.
Yes.
So it's usually alternate weekends. And then maybe the weekend that you don't have your child, you have a weekday dinner.
Yeah.
That's usually the structure. And then you split the public holidays and holidays. So I can see it from the perspective of the other parent that you've suddenly gone from seeing your kids every day to now alternate weekends and a weekday dinner, which is really very little. Yeah. And if your child or children is not yet on their phones and not able to communicate with you through, text and phone calls, then it is quite hard. I mean, access has to be age appropriate as well.
Are the kids asked what they want at a certain age? What?
Not by the court.
Okay.
I think the parents do ask them what they want, and usually for older children, parents are less likely to fight because the children. I mean, teenagers. How can you get them to do what you want anyway? How can you pin them down to Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5 to 7?
Forget about it.
It's not going to happen, right? Yeah. So at least, but teenagers also are good at making the arrangements. So even if you didn't fix a time, you could easily meet for dinner whenever.
Yeah.
When it's smaller children, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even up to age 10, it's much harder. And I think that's where all the fights are because there's also in Singapore the after school activities.
Yes.
And those often get in the way of access because the parent who doesn't get the child as often will say, well, why is tuition scheduled for 2 hours out of my 3 hours? That's ridiculous.
It's so tough.
So that's tough.
It's interesting. So my kids and I were having, I don't know if it was I think it was all 3 kids. We were watching something on TV and the subject came up, what happened if mummy cheated on daddy? I said,
Really?
so, yeah.
How did that happen?
I don't know. So I said, well, who would you, if we got divorced, who would you choose to live with? We love you, but we stay with mummy, daddy. Even if mummy cheated on me.
Yeah, but why do you want to punish her for cheating? See, this goes back to the money thing.
No, but my point is, no, forget the money. I'm just saying, I was just curious, so for example, if I cheated on a mummy,
but
they would never talk to me. They'd never talk to me again. That's what they said. But if mummy cheated on me, well, and so, and I just thought, okay, there's clearly a favorite there.
It's not about a favorite. I think it's just, your bond with your mum is usually quite strong.
100%.
Yeah.
Listen, I think I'm a great dad, but Tara is an amazing mum.
She is.
So I can't, compete. What celebrity divorce have you looked at and thought that was handled exceptionally well?
Okay, I don't really pay attention to all of these things, but I do, as horrendously cheesy as it was at the time, Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow, when they consciously uncoupled. As I say, it's a super corny term.
Yeah, I've never heard it before.
But they were trying to be mindful in their divorce.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that people should aim for, which is to be mindful in your divorce. To know that both of you are actually going through probably quite a hard time. Not saying it's always the case, but most of the time it's a hard time. It's a hard time for your kids. And so just remembering that whatever you choose to do to the other person, you're actually also doing to your child. And then maybe that tempers you wanting to serve the divorce papers on their birthday.
Do your clients say to you, have you got a counsellor that you can set me up with for me and for my children?
Sometimes they do ask for recommendations, but a lot of times, and I think this again goes back to our Asian society ways, is that people just don't think that they need a counselor. They see it as a weakness, or counselors are only for people with real problems. But I mean, actually, what's wrong with just talking to someone?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't talk to your friends,
or it's very difficult for them to be
your family about certain things, and you do need a little bit more help. But everyone's reluctant. You pay it, as you said just now, you'd pay your surgeon.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you pay your counselor?
Yeah.
They are there to help you.
Yeah.
And if it's not the right thing for you, because honestly, for some people, talk therapy is not the right thing.
What about marriage counselors? Have you, any of your couples, have they gone through that and you've seen they've at least tried that?
Yes, I have. Yeah. I do know people who have gone through marriage counseling. I don't really talk to them about what's happened in their marriage counseling, because that's not my problem.
I'm laughing not to be a bastard, but so this is how I always appease my wife. So, for example, years ago, she said, all of my girlfriends have got credit cards from their husbands, and I said they're bloody idiots. She said, who? And I said, the husbands. So she said, no, can I get a credit card? I said, yeah, absolutely. Go to the bank, fill in an application form. They'll give you one, right?
Yeah.
And I was I brought back basically a bunch of forms. I said, there you go. It's a joint account. You have to fill them all in. And Tara, you just looked at it, she threw it away. But going back to the counselling, so she then said, do you think we should see a marriage counsellor?
Yeah.
I said, well, nothing's broken unless you're telling me otherwise. And she said, yeah, but if you see a personal trainer, you might already be in good shape. But so I said, okay, let's do it if you want to do it. And so I called this lady that was referred to her.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I'd like to see you separately and Tara separately, and then together.
Yeah.
And you know me, as soon as Tara said it, I thought, okay, I'll do it, no problem. Met with her, spent a couple of hours with her, did all the homework. Tara saw her. We never had a couple session.
Okay.
Right, because it's like Lamar's class. She wanted to go to Lamar's class when we were pregnant with our first baby. Yeah. We got through half an hour. Yeah. And we looked at each other and said, let's go. But my point is, I think at least she shared an interest with me. Yeah. And I followed up on it. Because why I say that, a lot of old school men, they will not even consider doing these things. Right. And I actually would have gone to see, because it can't really hurt. Yeah. Right. And hopefully you go there and so you don't have problems. Yeah. I think a lot of people go to counsellors maybe when there's a problem. I think maybe you can go before.
Like a health check-in, like your annual health checkup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that's probably could be done. But the reality is actually, often one partner doesn't want to go. Yeah. And then...
Well, it's very difficult.
Or they're going, but they're just going through the motions. I've had a client say to me, I went for the counselling, but I wasn't, I was going through the motions to appease my partner, not because I cared or was committed to the counselling, which then, that already says that you're no longer really committed to the marriage, I guess.
I'm just curious, what percentages roughly of the cases that you deal with are settled in court or out of court?
Actually, the majority of them are now settled out of court.
Okay.
The reason for that is because that's what the court itself encourages.
Okay.
By offering its own mediations within the court system. And just because I think a lot of people don't want to waste money on their divorces, which is sensible. Honestly, why do you want to waste money fighting?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's actually crazy to me sometimes, because sometimes even if we're negotiating a settlement and they're quibbling over something like $10,000 to $20,000, let's just say it's that. And I'm like, you know what it will cost you to go and fight about this?
Yeah.
Why not just give it?
Yeah.
And then just take it as a sunk cost or something, and not fight over this amount. Because if everything is over here, we don't mediate, we don't settle, and we go to court, you're going to spend so much more, and you'll have so much more stress.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a longer journey. And then that means you transiting, getting to your new life, it's being delayed.
When I think about how complex the world has become with technology, I actually worry about the kids' future. Like Tara and I were talking about how the role of social media is having an influence on, students applying for universities, jobs that they look and they say, well, you attended this rally, this political rally, and you shouldn't have done, so on and so forth. What role has social media had, in modern day divorce? When you're doing research,
I think that's how people find out that spouse
is that what it was? Is that it?
Oh my goodness! So that's an interesting one that you mentioned. Actually, there's an Instagram profile that used to have anonymous disclosures.
Okay.
So people would go. They might be the third person, and they would then post anonymously to this profile saying, if your husband's name starts with L and he works in a company that starts with P, just know that he's been cheating on you with me.
Oh, shucks, really?
Yeah, so something like that. And you know what? I found out, I don't know how this came up on my Explore page, so I was just going through it and reading some of the most comedy and crazy things that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then, so one of those posts had come up, and then someone had replied saying, I think this is me. Like, I think that that's my husband.
Ayo.
And I was just like, mind blown.
Crazy.
That's so crazy. And then sometime after that, the person that I read about in social media came up to me as a client. And I was really shocked.
Jeez.
I had nothing to do with that, as in they came completely randomly. It just so happened. But I was shocked that I had read this, and then here they are in front of me, and this is really a thing.
Yeah. It's
that Instagram page, I think it's not shut down, but it's not really been operating lately.
But you know that, I guess the moral of the story, stay offline if you want to mess around. But a buddy of mine was telling me about Tinder when it first came out.
Yeah.
One of the dating apps.
Yeah.
And he's married. So I said, so why are you on it? He goes, yeah. I said, why? He goes, I just want to get a feel what's going on out there. But you're not going to cheat on your wife.
I don't think that's true.
Well, check this.
It's not true. It's not true. It's a lie.
Well, he told me.
Yeah.
That's what he told me. But that he had a picture of himself as well. Now, it was slightly disguised in the picture. It was not obvious.
Right.
But it was obvious. And I swear to God, within 2 days, a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
Who was on Tinder.
But I've screen grabbed it and sent it to his wife.
And well, she didn't. She sent it to me.
Okay.
And I called him up and said, you fucking bumper clutch. You're on this thing. What were you expecting? He goes, I didn't think. I can't even get my head around it.
Okay, to be fair, some people don't think very well.
Bumper clutch, by the way, for those of you who don't know, it means you idiot.
You mean gundu. It's your way of saying gundu. Yeah. Yeah, some people are not very clever. But I have found someone's husband, a friend's husband, on there.
But what happens, this is the thing I was thinking actually, because I thought about this. What happens if you had someone that wanted to create a profile with someone's image on it, put all their deets in there, but it's not the person? That could happen.
That could happen. That's something different.
You'd have to prove that you weren't the person. Because nowadays, stealing someone's identity is not going to be difficult, right?
Yeah.
I just think about those things.
I mean, you could prove it's not you, I guess.
I don't know if I told you this story. It really made me laugh. So this is a few years ago. Tara, I think Caden was about 11 or 12, maybe 13.
Okay.
And Tara was away for the weekend. And I said, right, kids, you're going to do some homework. And so I thought I was being a really good dad. So I said, I want you to choose an article from the Straits Times.
Yep.
And show me the article. And then what I want to do is underline any words that you don't understand, circle them, look them up in the dictionary, write down the definition of those words. I want you to précis what that article means.
Okay.
So I had to explain to them what précis means and everything. So Caden comes back 10 minutes later. There were only 3 words I didn't understand, Dad. I said, okay, no problem. What was it about? He goes, well, there was this article about this dating app called Grindr. So I looked at him, I said, okay. And he's young, right? So he said, so this gentleman went to a hotel room to meet another gentleman. When he got there, there were 2 gentlemen waiting for him. And then, so I said, press pause, because his younger sister was there.
Yeah.
So we walked away, and then the guy got accosted, got beaten up, basically, unfortunately.
Okay.
So the moral of the story is, check what homework you're giving your kids. And then, but it was like, then I had a lot of questions from him. What is Grindr? How does it work? Right? That was hilarious. When you're looking at couples, because one of the things that I study just in terms of sports, in my job, I always look at patterns.
Yep.
And why I think patterns are important, because you can almost predetermine ahead of time when something's about to happen. Right. So, for example, when I'm driving, touch wood, I've never had any points since I was 18. And I can anticipate, when you're driving, oh, that person's going to walk onto the street. That person's going to walk behind a bus.
Situational awareness.
Yeah, it's just like that.
Yeah.
But I'd look at patterns. What patterns do you think a couple can identify and say, we're going off course here. We need to take stock and really identify these issues before it leads to...
Well, I think it's when you're feeling resentful to the other person and you can't let go of it.
Tara, are you listening? Sometimes she looks at me like she wants to kill me.
And then, it comes out as passive-aggressive put-down comments, and you're putting down the other person.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's interesting because Ivana, she's 9 now, but last year she asked me, who's your hero?
Yes.
And unequivocally, my mum's one of my heroes, but Tara is my hero, right? I idolize her in many ways. I look at her and I think, wow, she's a very kind person. She's a very noble person. She's very wise, right? And what I realize is when I speak to a lot of couples when they break up, younger couples, I'd say that's okay, right? Even though heartbreak is horrible, because you've learned what's not right for you.
Yes.
What you don't want. Yeah. Right. So you've test driven that car.
Hopefully you've learned.
It's not for you.
Hopefully you've learned something.
But not everyone does, right? Yeah. But what I do say is that I've said this to my son. He had a relationship for about a year or so. I think it was that long. But I said, imagine if you'd spent 5 years of your life with that person, and then broke up. Not that you would have wasted 5 years, but now imagine you've had children and you get divorced. Yeah. So I said, I think it's actually not a bad thing. Do you know what I mean? So I like that. When you think a little bit about going through divorce, right? Do you think to yourself, if you were to ever get married again, if you saw the writing on the wall as a divorce attorney, would you say, I'm going to fuck this guy up later on? Or would you sit down and say, we need to see a counselor?
I think I would go for the counseling option because I know it can be helpful.
Yes. Yes.
I'm not interested in fucking anyone up. It's too much.
It's a lot of work.
It takes a lot of effort. I mean, sometimes clients ask me to write long, nasty letters. And I'm just like, but it's going to cost you more if I do that because I have to write a lot.
I think sometimes they don't care, though.
Sometimes they don't care, but the more money conscious ones will. But it's just a lot more effort to be mean to someone. Honestly, why not just be, if you know the writing's on the wall, just release the other person. Yeah. And you try and do so fairly. Hopefully they'll be fair to you. But I mean, the better thing would have been to make sure your finances are separate anyway.
Well, I'm curious. What about clients that have hidden assets? Is that a common theme?
It's not that common because some amount of disclosure is required if you're going to a fight.
Well, what happens if I've got a BVI account? Not that I have one.
All of those, okay, well, first of all, the BVI is becoming less it's becoming more transparent now. There's more requirements. So it's people don't hide things in BVI accounts. They just have cash sometimes, or they have accounts which they don't commingle, and it's somewhere. I mean, you can't find it if you never have any. I mean, a lot of the tracing that we do is based on the paper trail through the bank accounts, credit cards. Where's the money going? And honestly, it's better if an accountant does this. So the same way, why would you pay your lawyer to do this math and trace it to you? I don't get it. Get an accountant. So the accountants will go through it, and they will be the ones who can reveal to us whether there's an asset somewhere else or likely to be an asset somewhere else. But at the same time, if you're, well, let's say it's not your first rodeo, you might be clever enough to completely ring fence some cash somewhere and not touch that account, and never have a trace of all your other visible accounts ever transferring or receiving, then we won't know.
Have you ever had to deal with an annulment on in a marriage?
Yes.
Is that quite common here? Because I would have thought, because people get married prematurely in Singapore, partially because of the whole HDB concept.
Okay, the tricky part is that the requirements for an annulment are not so straightforward.
Okay.
So, for example, you can get an annulment if the marriage was willfully non-consummated.
Oh.
So a lot of people jump at, they don't see the willful part. They just see, non-consummation. We can agree that we didn't, because it's very common here to sign the marriage document, but only have the wedding ceremony later on.
Yeah.
So in their minds, nothing's happening. They don't consider themselves married until after the wedding ceremony. So often they don't start living together until after.
ROM is marriage, right?
But ROM would be the marriage document that they signed. So they are technically. And then maybe something happens in that period where they realize they don't want to get married they're married, but they don't want to be with that person anymore.
Yeah.
So they go for the non-consummation. I'm like, okay, but it's willful non-consummation, which means somebody made an effort and the other person rejected that effort willfully. How do you prove that? It has to be written. You have to explain it, how you made your overtures and how they were rejected repeatedly. Can't be one off.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's you can't sort of get married today and decide tomorrow you want an annulment. You need some evidence for that. The other ones are if the person didn't have mental capacity to get married.
Okay.
If they were actually married to someone else at the same time. So a lot of those are very difficult.
That one, criteria. I bet, is more common than people think.
And then one of the more common ones is you have consummated and the person gave you an STD.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that should be a consideration, actually.
Well, yes, it should be. But so those are the reasons for annulment.
Are there any legal loopholes that people should know about when it comes to divorce?
There's no loopholes.
I thought maybe there might be.
No, there aren't really. I mean, the better thing to do is just come clean with everything and then get it done, get on your way and just move forwards.
I think that's for everything in life.
Yeah.
Right?
There's no point hiding this, hiding that. It all comes out and then you look bad. And you might be punished then so if you've been naughty in hiding your assets or not disclosing, the court will punish you by giving more to the other person to make up for it.
Yeah.
So that's where the compensation and punishment element comes in.
How has Singapore law evolved in terms of divorce proceedings and divorce rules?
They've tried to make it more streamlined. We're moving towards a divorce that you can do yourself. It's not been operationalized yet, but the legal fraternity or the family lawyers at least have seen the new forms which are going to come out, and they are very much aimed at a DIY divorce. Well,
that's the other thing with AI, just in terms of legal contracts in general.
Yes.
Right. AI is just, it's a game changer for so many industries.
I agree with that. Yeah. It is very scary. Although I think it's also sometimes quite obvious if ChatGPT have written have written the documents. It's quite obvious to see.
Yeah.
So it's got its pros and cons.
For sure.
But I do think that a DIY divorce appeals to those who know what they want, who know that they're going to part amicably and fairly, and they don't therefore need the lawyer to, fill in forms. Why do we need us to fill in forms? I mean, that's ridiculous. You should be able to fill in a form yourself. We should just be here to give those who need legal advice. Yeah.
If I know we kind of answered this before, but just because I've been brought into these 4 relationships.
Yeah.
If a couple that were about to come, let's just say Tara and I came to you.
Yes.
And we're saying, look, we're thinking about getting divorced. We've got kids, yada, yada. But we don't necessarily want this as an outcome.
Yes.
What would you suggest? Apart from just seeing a counsellor, but what kind of steps would you walk them through? For example, look, just so you know, if you go through a divorce.
Yes, I would.
This is what it looks like. So you at least, this is one end of the journey.
Yes.
Maybe you should explore, what would you talk to them about?
I mean, I can give them a picture of what their life might look like after a divorce. I often do actually tell clients what life will be like during the divorce. The problem is that it's one of those things that if you don't go through it, you can't believe it. Yeah. If I tell you it's going to be emotional and hard,
you have no idea.
You're like, yeah, but you have no idea. Yeah. But it's kind of like having kids. Like if everyone said to you, well, having kids is actually hard, you'd be like, yeah, but you don't know how hard until you have a kid.
For sure.
So I guess it's one of those things.
Good analogy.
Yeah. But yeah, I will go through it. I will say that, you will give me a lot of your money and a lot of your time, and you will have a lot of stress, and I will make you feel stressed, and your spouse will make you feel stressed. And you will be doing all of this on top of your day-to-day life.
If you could rewrite divorce law, what's the one thing that you'd consider changing or maybe implementing?
Okay, the only thing I would consider changing for Singapore is that you have to wait 3 years before you can be divorced.
Yeah.
And in most other places, you don't have to wait that long. I would change that because I think it's fair.
So what is it in other countries like the UK?
So in the UK, it's 1 year. Yeah. I think 1 year is enough.
Things
3 years is too long.
When I think about like my mum's estate's going through probate right now.
Yeah.
It's just such a long, arduous process, and it's
probate. Here it's quite fast, actually. I don't know about the UK.
No, I think
it depends on the speed of your lawyer as well. Yeah.
Yeah, forget about it.
I'm not going to say anything, but in Singapore, we do things pretty fast.
Yeah.
No, I think that sometimes people who haven't lived together and then they start living together after marriage, and it very quickly becomes a reality that the marriage is not for them. But then why do they have to wait another 2.5 years, let's say?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
What about, do you believe that a no lawyer divorce can happen?
Yes.
Have you seen it?
No, because I'm a lawyer.
Okay. But you've not heard of it? You're not...
No, there are people who go and do it themselves. Okay. And honestly, because I practice Sharia law as well as civil law.
Yes.
And when I used to go to the Sharia courts before COVID, when you would be going to court more, there would be a lot of people getting divorced in person without lawyers because they couldn't afford lawyers.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that they're not very well advised on the orders of court that they're agreeing to between each other. And it may not be a problem immediately, but then it becomes a problem when they're trying to effect the order of court. And then a few years later, they then have to lawyer up because the court order that they agreed on is just not workable, not a solution. It's not financially sound. So that's the problem I see with that. I think you can't really avoid seeing a lawyer, but maybe if you have agreed on everything, you should, before completely signing off on the orders, just have them review it.
Yeah.
To make sure that it's something that is workable.
And also it makes it a lot easier, right? The steps, the process.
The steps and process are definitely a lot easier if you engage a lawyer, but it is costly. Yeah. If you don't mind making the effort, then by all means, do it yourself. But I think it is important to have a workable order of court. And sometimes people think, oh, this is workable, but it's not.
Obviously, look, there are parts of your job that are really terrible, but part of it must be rewarding as well. When you see a good outcome. I'm always happy
when I get a good outcome.
Yeah.
So
what is a good outcome for you?
A lot of times the reason why we're fighting in court is because someone is just very stubbornly being very unfair. And so a good outcome is making sure that there is a fair division, that, the spouse who isn't able to support themselves, usually the wife, is able to get the maintenance they need, that the children's maintenance needs are being met.
Yeah.
That to me is a good outcome, that there's, a fair amount of access for the parents with the children. That's a good outcome.
Do you see any of your clients get happily remarried again?
They don't usually come back to me after that.
How do you decompress after dealing with a really hard day, disputing things?
I stroke my kitties. Well, no, I recently got some pet cats, so I do find having them around.
How many pet cats? Just
I have 4 now.
Only 4.
Only 4.
But pet cats are like tattoos. When you get one, you want another one.
Well, I mean, they needed company. Well, one would not be enough because it would need company. So there's a few more because I do spend quite a lot of time out of home.
Yeah.
So it's good for them to have each other.
They're house kittens, right?
They're house, yeah. So they stay at home. I like to do different things. Traveling or hobbies, whatever.
Well, what I love about you is just you've tried so many different things, right? Skiing, or snowboarding.
Yeah.
What are when you look at because that's one of the things I really admire about you.
I'm really proud of myself for doing these things because
you should be.
A lot of it was done, I would say, older in age. Not, my most adventurous self probably came out in my 30s.
Yeah.
Not so much in my 20s. In my 20s, I was not adventurous, but also I was a parent to a younger child. And so the opportunity to do a lot of things is maybe less.
I love that about you.
Yeah.
I really admire that. So so firstly, what are the things that you've enjoyed doing the most in terms of your activities? Like rank 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think the best thing I ever did was to learn snowboarding because that brought me into a community of a bunch of other things. So
you got to go to beautiful places.
It's not just about going to the beautiful places, but it's meeting a collection of people who are like-minded.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the people that you meet day to day in your daily life. So for me to snowboard, I obviously have to travel out of Singapore. And because my friends are not that keen on snow sports, it means I have to go into a tour.
Your friends aren't keen on any sports.
Yeah, okay, never mind. I have to go into a tour and find company because it's not something you should be doing by yourself because of the inherent dangers.
For sure.
And so through trying to do that, I've met many women because I like to go on women-centric tours. I found a company that's amazing that caters to the kind of snowboarding I want to do, which is I need to stay in a nice hotel and be well fed as well.
Absolutely.
It's a holiday.
Absolutely.
It's a holiday. So I don't just want to be staying in a hostel and sharing a shower and that sort of thing. So it's nice to have found that. And that's my snowboarding community. And I go on the women only ones because I do find that women are kinder to each other.
Yeah.
When you're on a hill, a lot of us are not that good at snowboarding, or we need some help, some learning to progress. Whereas men tend to be a little bit, I'm just going to bomb down this hill.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if I have any technique. I don't need any brakes. I just want to go fast.
Yeah.
Women are not like that. You kind of want to do it nicely and see the scenery.
You want to walk away at the end of the day as well.
And, so I've met so many women, not necessarily similar in age, but yes, some of them are similar in age from very diverse backgrounds. And now we that's our thing. We still go on these tours. We get together every 1 or 2 years in a different location. We have a wonderful week together where you can snowboard as much or as little as you want, but also you can wine taste, go to the spa or onsen, or have a taste, food tasting experiences. I went to Slovenia in 2023, for example. I'd never been there. To Lake Bled. I did the sabrage thing, which is when you do the champagne with a saber. And it was just so amazing. It was so beautiful. And the thing is, I wouldn't have been able to go with my friends. And I also wouldn't have been able to travel with my son there because he's not that interested in that.
Yeah.
So
good for you.
To me, snowboarding has brought these other experiences. And that would have been the best one to learn. But at the moment, I've become really unfit. So I'm just on a fitness and health journey.
It's hard, right? As we get older, we have to really work on it. How do you get the best from yourself? In business, in a very competitive landscape? Like, what do you do, right, inside and outside of the office?
To get the best for myself, I guess that is trying to maintain a healthier lifestyle, if that's what you're asking, which means also, though, shutting off from work at a reasonable time.
Yeah.
We were just talking about it earlier, about how we went to watch a movie on Sunday night and it finished late, and then it made Monday a difficult day.
Well, I admire you guys for just staying awake, because now I've become that person that
so
halfway through the movie.
I do think that, unfortunately, getting enough sleep, getting good food in you, getting exercise is important to being physically able to do your job.
Yeah.
I mean, it keeps your brain sharp as well. But also knowing that you have to balance things, like your work hours are this. And this is something that I try and implement for my team as well, even though they're younger lawyers and younger ones usually work longer hours. But it's important for me, for them to have work-life balance, so that if they are needing to spend time with their child, or they're just needing their own personal time to go to, I don't mind if they go off a bit earlier because they want to catch that yoga or Pilates class.
Yeah.
I know that they will appreciate it, and they will feel their balance again.
I love it.
And then that will make them come tomorrow to work in a good state. And you need that because of the demands on us, because we do work with very emotionally charged people, that if you don't have that balance, like the problem with divorce or family lawyers is that for the younger lawyers, there's a very high attrition rate.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, in some work culture spaces, they're just seen as disposable, or you just get the most that you can out of that person. And when they quit after 3 years or 5 years, then it's okay, we can hire someone else.
You know, the thing is, because we've talked a bit about, being managers and coaches. It's because I tell you why, you've got to live it. So, for example, when on my last trip to Hong Kong, Isaac and I arranged for his girlfriend was going to join him. So the flight was already paid for. So they could spend the weekend together, get a little holiday in. And then he came back on Monday and took half the day off. And then actually just challenging things. So I said to him, so young Isaac over there, I said on Friday, I said, you know what, why don't you do something a bit different? I said, have you got the balls to do a bungee jump? And he goes, yeah. I said, right, book it right now for tomorrow. And he did it.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know there was bungee jumping in Hong Kong.
Is it? No, in Singapore.
Oh, in Singapore.
So we did the Hong Kong thing. So my point is I'd already paid for his flight. So I said, well, why don't you bring your girlfriend over, and then you can get a free holiday, kind of. And gave him a little bit of extra time off work. Not a lot, but now he had that weekend. But my point is, on Friday, I just said, let's mix it up. Right. And I didn't do the bungee, by the way. I've done 5 in the vain attempt to get a little bit taller.
Oh my God.
And it clearly didn't work. I'm still 5'6.5". Have you done one?
No. So someone told me that your retinas can detach, and I'm just not that keen on it, but I have jumped out of a plane.
I know you have.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Having done both, I do think the bungee jump in some ways is a bit scary because the ground rush. Right. So, I had that chat with my son. I said, which would you rather do? He said, if there's only one, it would be a parachute jump. And I said, unequivocally.
You
did yours in New Zealand, right? So it's stunning.
It was really stunning. And again, I was there because of snowboarding.
So it's cold though up there at that time.
It was pretty cold, But it's only momentary. But it's amazing. What a feeling.
Queenstown.
In Queenstown, yeah. And I mean, I did entertain the idea of learning to get my solo license for parachute jumping.
I've looked into it.
But it's just very difficult in Singapore. You have to keep traveling up to Thailand, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to make that monetary commitment as well. When I can get my thrills in other ways. So
I know.
That's fine.
I looked into it. So the place that I was looking to do it was in Norway, or is in Norway.
Okay.
Because it just looks stunning, and you can do it there like over a week.
Yes.
Right? But you've got to be fully committed. And the only reason why I wanted to do it is because I'm terrified of heights. I'm terrified of heights.
I'm actually very scared of heights. Like even some shopping centers where the escalator
I can't.
is in the middle of the building. I just I don't like that at all.
Okay, so quick few questions.
Yes.
If you could go back to any one time in your life, professionally, personally, when would it be and why?
I think I don't know. I think you always want to go back to your 20s. It was the time when you had the most energy and you could do the most things. And I feel like I didn't do enough. Like I could have done so much more, but I didn't.
But that's the thing.
But it's a difficult thing to do. To sort of, you don't appreciate it until you've lived your life.
Tara and I are having a conversation with Caden, who's turning 18, as you know, in November. So we said, look, we'd like to take you away. And he said no. And I think he's been cost conscious. I think he's overly focused on his exams. But I said, look, when you look back, if we were in Singapore and we went to a random restaurant or had dinner here, you won't remember it. But if we go away as a family, you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So, mate, we're going away. So, but you know what I mean? You want to learn to live life. That's the thing.
Yeah, I do. So, yeah, that's probably what I would do again.
What would you say are your greatest strengths and weaknesses, personally and professionally?
I think my strength is my weakness at the same time. And that is that I'm just me. Like, I believe in being me. I don't want to dilute or filter myself too much.
Well, you are authentic.
Yeah. Like, I want to just do it the way I want to do it, be the person I want to be. And then if clients aren't on board with them, they can go to some other lawyer.
Good.
You know, if you're, I want to do it in a way that has integrity and honesty. And if you're not down for that, then it's okay. There are other people who you can pay to do it the way you want it.
I want to talk specifically about your coaching. What are you working on now, right? As you enhance your coaching aspect to what you're doing. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I am getting qualified or working towards a qualification as an ICF coach, which is the International Coaching Federation. Although I don't believe that you need to have qualifications to be a coach. I have found the course very useful, and I'll be completing it at the end of this month.
Brilliant.
I just find it useful in day-to-day life. Like, you can subtly coach people to get the best out of them. It's not necessarily that it must be that someone comes to you with a problem and you have to coach them out of it. But it just, even in your own self-management, sometimes you can coach yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're stuck in a conundrum, you don't know which way to go, you can just ask yourself the questions which can help you come to a conclusion, or even to identify how important or how you're feeling about something. Put yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. That's the easiest way. If I feel something about something, am I at a 1? Am I at a 10? If I'm at a 3, do I want to be at a 5, or do I want to go back to a 1? And how will I get there? And, you know, what are the things I'm going to do to get there? And is it something that's really important or not? So, you know, you just sort of talk yourself through it this way.
I think it's huge, right?
Yeah. And then that helps you work through it, because a lot of times we are stuck in things and we don't know how to get out of it. And sometimes talking to people doesn't always help. It doesn't always get you clarity. But if you can implement some of the coaching strategies, you can help yourself. But if not, you can call your friends who have learned coaching. So you or me. Yeah. And then we can help you. Although you're not really meant to coach your friends, but we can try it.
Yeah.
But I think it's just that, like, even trying to get more out of my colleagues or my juniors, they also suffer the same. You know, they get stuck in certain things. They don't know how to progress. They don't know how to deal with a client. And it's very simple. It's a lot of taking a step back.
Yeah.
And then just asking certain very important questions, but making sure you're listening to what the person is saying to you, so that you can ask the meaningful question, which you know what they are. It's just like how, what, why, who, where. Those are the questions, and that's it.
It is it, but I think it's important, because if you speak to someone who's already thought about those things, and it opens your whole thought process, it's a game changer. Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't spend enough time on themselves, mastering themselves.
No. I don't think that people really see the importance of coaching, but that's because they don't know what it is. Yeah. And I mean, that was the same for me. Like, I thought of it of a little bit hokey pokey, you know, but now I can see that it has actually a lot of use. And I think that people are realizing it. I mean, did you know, for example, that the government spends quite a lot on coaching its top levels? You know, so the coaches who ran the course do that. Okay. And they're paid a lot to do that. But I think that everyone benefits from coaching. You know, 100%. It's not just the top levels, because you're supported by so many other levels. And those people also, don't you want to get the best out of them as well? Yeah. And then that makes everything more efficient and better.
It's so important, you know, as a former sportsman, you know, as a businessman, 100%, how you think about things, how you process them, your confidence going into something, the planning, the prep. And as a career coach, what I realize is a lot of people tend to move in their career when they get a phone call or a tap on the shoulder, but very rarely is it very well thought out. And I talk about that. Yeah. Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
No.
You know, I was really looking forward to today's chat. We've avoided anything too risque.
Yes.
You know?
Well, I think that's for your other chat. The one we're going to film after this.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Take care.